This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for joining me. We've got a lot to get to today, including our interview with Trevor Hass, who covers Boston College. So we'll get to him in just a moment. But before we do, I want to remind you guys that this podcast is presented by our friends at Thomas Auto Group. Appreciate their support of the On the Pony Express podcast. And when you go into any of their stores, up 75 in McKinney, and you mention On the Pony Express, you get employee pricing on a new or pre-owned vehicle. So make sure you head in there today, whether it be Bob Thomas Ford, Brandon Thomas Subaru, or Brandon Thomas Volkswagen, and check them out today, and they'll help you save big.
Shopping for a new car, truck, or SUV? Look no further than the Thomas Auto Group. Browse our selection of over 2,000 vehicles from 3 great brands.
Watch this!
All online and in a few simple steps. Just click on the vehicle you want, save big on the most popular brands, and drive away happy. Plus, all vehicles sold are backed by the Thomas Promise. Visit our website, thomasautogroup.com, or shop in-store at the Thomas Auto Group in McKinney, home of the Thomas Promise.
Appreciate their support of the On the Pony Express podcast. We also have to remind you guys that you need to head over to ontheponyexpress.com, subscribe for just $1 for your first week, and then 50% off your first year. So a huge amount of savings there. It's only really a few bucks a month when you do that deal. And let me tell you, between recruiting, basketball, football, the transfer portal is almost here as well. Plus just the general push for SMU right now to a conference championship game that they're working on. It is the time to be on the message board every single day, eating up all the stuff we bring to the table here at ontheponyexpress.com. So without further ado, we go to our interview with Trevor Hass, who covers the Boston College Eagles, and he'll give us the preview on the BC side of things as SMU welcomes BC to Ford Stadium, 2:30 p.m. Central on ESPN on Saturday. Happy now to be joined by Trevor Hass, who covers Boston College up there at the Globe. Trevor, thanks for the time today. It was really quite the game last week for Boston College, coming back from a Syracuse comeback to beat Syracuse, ending a 3-game losing streak for BC. Kind of take us into that game a little bit as far as your overall takeaways and what BC is sitting with right now.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Happy to hop on. So BC was, 4-1. Everything was kind of red in the world in Chestnut Hill. People were fired up about this team. Then all of a sudden they lost 3 straight and things were spiraling. They were 4-4. So it was kind of a gut check time for BC. And, they built a 14-0 lead against Syracuse, then fell behind 21-14, as you alluded to, and then really played a strong second half. And that was their biggest weakness the past few weeks, is that they really played well in stretches, but couldn't really sustain it throughout an entire game. So it was definitely an encouraging sign for them to see that they could finish the game and play really well in that second half. And it was really the run game. They carried them all game. They had 313 rushing yards. Kai Robichaud had 198 himself. So very impressive performance, which I'm sure SMU fans remember last year. The BC definitely knows how to run the ball. So it was a really big win that ultimately saved their season. And now they have to win one more to get, a bowl game. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, when you look at Kai Robichaud, I want to start there with him. 198 yards, 28 carries, just a really physical back from what I recall watching last year and just seeing what he's been able to do for them. Is this BC offense, kind of at the point right now where they have to run the football to have any sort of chance to kind of be successful offensively?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So Thomas Castellanos, their starter, who SMU fans will also remember well, a little too well probably.
Yeah.
So he left in the third quarter of the game against Syracuse. It was kind of a combination of like a slight injury, but O'Brien didn't really say it was solely injury based. He kind of, said like it's a little bit of everything basically was his quote. So Grayson James came in. He's the backup. He's actually a Duncanville, Texas native. So local fans might know him as well. So there's definitely some ties here. So he came in and played extremely well. Only threw 6 passes, but managed the game well and was efficient 5 out of 6 when he did come in and, threw the ball pretty well. So it's kind of they're at a crossroads right now where Tommy's been the guy and he's had a strong career at BC. He's really made it for himself and on a national stage as well. He's become a pretty, well-known quarterback in the ACC. but he's been slumping lately. That's just the truth of it. He hasn't been playing his potential. So now it's up to O'Brien to decide what they want to do, and Will Long, the offensive coordinator, just do they want to go with Tommy, who knows the offense and has been there before, or Grayson James, who's been, really solid lately and has potential and does throw a better ball on paper. So the run game is definitely the strength of the team, and Robichaux is really a downhill back who can create a lot of yards after contact, very physical downhill. But if you have James out there, BC theoretically will be able to throw the ball a little bit more than they did last year against SMU or have in recent weeks. But it's not like he's going to throw it 40 times a game. Whoever's out there, it's going to be kind of a 10 to 20 range, and they're going to run the ball down your throat. So it doesn't change too much, whoever's out there, but it will change a little bit if James is. If he's out there, they'll probably throw a little bit more than they would with Castellanos.
Is Grayson able to move around a little bit? Obviously, Tommy's just such a unique talent running the ball and making plays like that. But take us inside that, comparison, I guess, and what they're going to be able to do with maybe Grayson versus Tommy if he does get the start.
So that's been the weird part to me, is that Tommy has really lost his luster as a runner. That's been the most surprising part of this, probably this entire season, actually, is that like O'Brien came in, he's obviously coached a ton of great quarterbacks, excellent track record, really good coach. But he kind of has this NFL style where he's trying to make Tommy a pocket passer, and Tommy's not a pocket passer. So it's kind of a weird situation where it's like they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, is the analogy I keep using. So it's worked in stretches. He's had some really good games, like against Missouri. They lost that game, but he played really well in stretches. FSU, obviously, he was really good to start the season. FSU kind of stinks now, so it loses a little bit of its luster, but still he played well in that game. And he's played well most of the year until the past few games, but he's just had costly turnovers in key moments and really has struggled to hold on to the ball. So it's been like, a bad fumble here, a bad pick here. It hasn't been like a terrible product overall. It's just like key moments where he'll kind of unravel. So Grayson James is, he's less proven. He's played fewer snaps in college football. He's a guy who, like Tommy, was, under recruited and kind of proved himself at the college level. He played decently well at FIU. And then came to BC, and he's played well when he's gotten his chance. He led them to a win against Western Kentucky, who's now 7-2, so that's a pretty good win. They barely won that game by 1 point. And then Syracuse the other day, he played pretty well when he came out there. So there's no reason not to go with James. I would probably go with James just because there's no compelling reason not to go with James. It's kind of like if Tommy were playing better, I would choose Tommy, but the reality is that he's not. So I'd probably go with James. He's not quite as mobile. I mean, the reality is that he's not going to, get those 15, 20-yard scampers quite as much, but it probably throws a better ball, as I said earlier, and it's not like he's a stiff out there. He can move a little bit. So I think the guys trust either one of them, and I don't think there's a major drop-off either way. I think they're about even, but I would probably go with James.
The defense for BC, respectable group. They're able to, from what I saw against Syracuse, who's not necessarily known to run the football a lot, but they were able to hold them to 39 yards on the ground. SMU, on the other hand, is going to want to run the football. They're going to want to run it as much as Syracuse threw the football this past weekend. What have you seen from the front from BC this season? Obviously, they've got Donovan Ezeraku, who's a star, but what do you think about their group overall and just kind of that matchup as SMU wants to run the football?
Yeah, well, you said it. Donovan Ezeraku has been definitely the best player on either side, all three phases. He's clearly their number one player this year by a significant margin. So he's number 3 all-time at BC in sacks now, which is pretty impressive. I mean, they've had a lot of good guys over the years on the D-line, so kudos to him. He's been good throughout his whole career. He's never been a bad player. He's always been good, but this year he's really taken it to another level and been one of the best players in the entire country at the D-line position, so kudos to him. And then Cam Horsley is also a guy who has a chance to play in the NFL. He's very physical, very good at stopping the run. So I would expect BC to have some success in that area. Obviously, SMU is a different animal than Syracuse when it comes to running the ball. I mean, we all know that SMU's run game is one of the best in the ACC and one of the better ones in the country. So I think the key to this game is really the O-line, D-line battle. It comes down to that in a lot of games, but I think this game in particular, it's very important. I mean, BC will have to run the ball to win this game. That's just the reality. They're not going to throw 30, 40 times a game, as I said earlier. So I think if BC is able to, establish the run and get kind of 5, 6, 7-yard rushes like they were against Syracuse, then I think BC will have a good chance to be in this game. But if SMU, which obviously has a really stout run defense, can stop the run consistently and hold them to, 0, 1, 2, 3 yards, then I think SMU has a chance to win by 15, 20, 30 points. So I think it all comes down to the line of scrimmage, in my opinion.
You look at the secondary for BC, one of our add-on 3 true freshman standouts from last week was Ashton McShane, starting his 3rd straight game on the season and just being able to have some key pass breakups against what is a good Syracuse passing attack. What does the secondary look like? And obviously his emergence has to be a little bit of a key to maybe slowing down SMU's passing game as well.
Yeah, so they lost Amari Jackson, who's probably their best player in the secondary, definitely one of their 2 or 3 best, probably their best. So he's out for the year with an ACL injury, so obviously a tough blow there. And I think he's got a shot to make the NFL too long term. He might probably come back next year now that he missed the rest of this year. But so they're kind of compensating with him out. It's been a bit of an adjustment. I mean, the secondary has played well overall. Like against a team like Syracuse, you're not just going to hold them to 20, 30 passing yards. It's just not going to happen. So they did get a lot of yards, but they stopped them in key moments throughout that game. You know, when Syracuse was kind of knocking at the door, BC was able to get some key stops and get off the field. So I think the secondary has been solid. I wouldn't say it's been outstanding, but I think, guys like McShane and Max Tucker, Omar Thornton, they're young guys who have really stepped up and played well. So I actually think it will be one of the best units in the ACC next year or the year after. I think right now it's pretty good. It's solid, but long term, if a lot of the guys stay and they get some other new recruits and or transfers, I think it could be extremely good.
New coaching staff this season. What are some of the biggest changes that you've noticed as Bill O'Brien and his staff have taken over versus the group that SMU faced just last year in the Fenway Bowl?
Yeah, so I think the identity of the team is actually very similar. Like O'Brien and Hafley both wanted to just run the ball down your throat. They want to be very physical, hard-nosed, kind of have a Boston like gritty mentality, which obviously like coaches overuse that, but it's also kind of true. Like they're not going to win by scoring 50 points or throwing the ball like crazy. They're going to be tough, physical, overpowering. So I think both coaches align there, which I think is the right way to approach it at BC. I think the differences are, Thomas Castellanos early in the season, he said, it's not like we can do this. It's like we're going to do this. So I think it's kind of a slight nuance that O'Brien has really preached. Like they're kind of abolishing like the underdog mentality that they've had the past few years. Now it's like, okay, we are one of these teams. We are a favorite. We believe we can, make some noise in the ACC. Obviously right now they're further down than they want to be, but that's kind of been the mentality throughout where it's like, not that they can do it, but that they actually will do it. They're going to do it. So it's just about kind of instilling that culture every day where it's like, all right, we are an excellent team. We're one of the best in the ACC. We're going to make this happen. So O'Brien's just a no-nonsense guy who really gets the best out of his players. And I've definitely seen him hold them accountable all year. If they, mess up a practice, he's going to let them know. So it's definitely a physical, overpowering style of football. And I think he really brings the best out of his players so far.
Are there X factors that you see as far as needing to step up for BC to pull off what is now a 17-point spread on this game, which is kind of wild to think about, just comparing the two squads from last year. But, who are some of your X factors or what in this game for BC that can really make game changing, plays and impacts?
Yeah, I would think of two. I would say the wide receivers have to step up. They actually have a really talented wide receiver group, but you may not think just looking at it, but it's actually probably one of their best units. It's just the chemistry with Tommy hasn't really been there the past few weeks where it was last year in stretches and early in the year in stretches. It's kind of just disappeared. So don't be surprised if like the tight ends and wide receivers, all of a sudden you look up and you're like, these guys are actually pretty good because they are good. So if Grayson James plays and he gets that chemistry going right away, obviously SMU will prepare to stop the run because of last year and because of BC's identity. So if BC ends up throwing the ball pretty effectively, I wouldn't be stunned. I think SMU will figure it out as the game progresses. But I actually think, as I said, it's not going to be 40 passes, but I think they will sneak them in there and they will, go to their wide receivers. Jerron Bradley, Jaden Skeet, tight end Kamari Morales are some names to know there. And then special teams. I mean, that's been BC's biggest Achilles heel the entire year. You don't really think about it in most games. And then once you have to think about it, you kind of do. And you're like, oh, wow, this is really not going too well. So the punting has been pretty bad. They've averaged about like 25, 30 yards per punt at times this year. It's rarely more than 40. So don't be surprised to see a shank or two. The field goal kickers are, they're okay. The Liam Connor has been decent, but he missed one, a 29-yarder last game, which kind of it changed the complexion of the game a little bit. They ended up winning, but it wasn't where it should have been because it could have been up more points. And the extra points are not a foregone conclusion. He's made all those, but you never really know what's going to happen. So it's not like they're terrible. I just wouldn't say it's a strength. So I think I would look at the wide receivers and the special teams as areas to look for in this game.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you thought of the BC special teams, but you covered it very, very well because SMU's kind of improved that unit. They have one of the better kickers in the country, so I figured, the last couple of weeks for SMU, they faced a couple really good field goal kickers, but it sounds like BC is still working through some things there. But as you get down to it, I know it's early in the week. We haven't heard injury updates on each side. We haven't spoken to anybody on either side of the team. But what's your early feel on how this game plays out? And if you have already locked in a prediction, you can feel free to let it fly.
So at the start of this year, of the year, I penciled this in as an SMU win even before SMU was a title contender, just because of last year. Like I figured, BC was probably the worst team last year. BC was pretty good, but SMU was better on paper. And they, SMU had to, they got the snub, and then they came up to Boston and lost a game they probably could have won. So I would assume that, considering they have so much of that team back, that they would probably win this game. And that was back in, August. And I haven't really changed that opinion. I think SMU is just going to win. I think they're a better team. I think, like I said earlier, BC has to run the ball to be effective at this point in time. SMU's biggest strength, arguably, I think you agree with this, is stopping the run. So I think that, in order to have any chance, BC has to get, 100 plus yards from Robichaux, and I'm not sure that's going to happen. So I would say the most likely outcome is SMU by like 10 to 20, somewhere in that range. But I do think it could get interesting if BC can run the ball, because all of a sudden, if they're playing their style and they're kind of going down their throat and they're getting long drives, like those 15, 20 play yard drives that they really want to have, that they had some last year, that could get interesting. But I think SMU will take it. Score wise, I guess, it would probably be something like 31-17, somewhere around there, give or take. So that requires BC to make a field goal, of course, but somewhere in that range. So I'll go 31-17 SMU.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because these are two teams that love to run the football, so that could impact your over under, your total on that front. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I will say, as far as everybody knows to account for Donovan Ezeraku, and SMU's offensive line at times in pass protection has been iffy a little bit. They've improved from where they were earlier this season, but it hasn't been sunshine and rainbows on that aspect of the offense. So if they can get some pressures, if they can force Kevin Jennings into some turnovers, this one could get interesting, like you said. But yeah, I think BC's going to have to run the ball as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Jennings responds after last year. He didn't play his best game, obviously, and he's really played well most of his career. So I'm just curious to see how that unfolds. I think he'll play a really strong game, and I do think it'll be James for BC, and I think he'll play decently well, but I think SMU just has too much firepower and too much continuity from last year.
A battle of two South Dallas rival high school quarterbacks in Duncanville and South Oak Cliff there for Grayson and Kevin Jennings. So quite the dynamic there as we get ready for this one, 2:30 p.m. Central on ESPN in Dallas on Saturday. So Trevor, safe travels down for it, and hope you enjoy the time in Dallas, as it'll be a little bit different weather when these two teams face off this time around.
Very true. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Trevor, and appreciate you jumping on with us. Welcome back to the On the Pony Express podcast. Appreciate Trevor for jumping on with us. A lot of good stuff there from him, just giving you guys a glimpse into what Boston College is bringing to the table this weekend to this matchup inside Ford Stadium. I do want to remind you guys, before we keep going, that we're also partnered up with Mizzen+Main. And if you have watched the podcast before, you've seen me in a Triple D polo, but now I've got the just regular red Mustang on with the striped polo look. And I tell you what, this is one of those shirts that is one of my favorites from Mizzen, as you can go to Mizzen+Main.com and find the SMU collection. And the great thing about it is they have all sorts of different designs with the SMU logo, whether it be the Triple D, whether it be the traditional red Mustang. And the great thing is they just breathe so well. And I really appreciate that about their items. And look, when you go on to Mizzen+Main, you can get 15% or 20% off, depending on what offer you get hit with when you give them your email. But you can't use it on the college stuff. That's because of licensing. But what I can tell you is it is absolutely worth the price that you pay for this premium material, this premium fabric that they do have in their clothing. And I absolutely love it. The polo that I was interviewing Trevor with is a Mizzen+Main polo. Again, they breathe so well. They just fit so well. And whether it be the button downs or the polos, I absolutely love what they bring to the table. I'm looking forward to trying out actually their suits and blazers and their pants as well here pretty soon, which I'm excited about. And we've got, as it gets cold, some really fun stuff for you guys to see on the jacket side of things too. Some really high quality stuff there from our friends at Mizzen+Main. So all they're asking is you go check out their website, Mizzen+Main.com. I can tell you, it is my favorite clothing brand right now. I mean, they just absolutely kill it. And as a big sweater, I need all the help that I can get. So Mizzen+Main, they also partnered up with SMU as well. Jake Bailey and some of the guys, Jonathan McGill. So you're supporting SMU athletes as well if you can support Mizzen+Main and their SMU collection. So order now. They do take a little bit extra time just around holidays and to get it all embroidered and things like that. So perfect time to get it and then be able to gift it to your favorite Mustang, or they do have other colleges out there as well. So check them out, Mizzen+Main.com. All right. Wanted to use the rest of this podcast to kind of just riff a little bit for you guys as I'm headed down to Florida, as you heard if you listened to the podcast with Hayden earlier this week. And so I am not bringing the podcast equipment. A lot going on. Michelle's birthday week. So we're going to celebrate her and then celebrate a little wedding too. So we will have you guys covered with QB Chronicles later this week, breaking down SMU Boston College from Kyle Padron, Garrett Gilbert. We also are nearing the addition of 2 more podcasts. So it is nice to know that even if I am going to miss out on all my podcast equipment the back half of the week, we have tons of content for you guys. So check it out. You can always find us at ontheponyexpress.com. But it was a bye week. SMU is hitting the reset button, getting healthy. And as you're listening to this, I have not talked to Rhett Lashley, and we haven't had the media availability just yet this week. So even if this drops on Tuesday, you're listening to it Tuesday night after Rhett's talked, I am recording this before. But really the latest thing that we're watching as we get out of SMU's bye week is Jake Bailey's status. The wide receiver was nicked up in that Duke game towards the end of that first half when he made a clutch reception for the Mustangs. And since then, he has been out, and he's been able to be out at practice. I think it's something where, and this is more just my opinion, they are trying to get him to a point where he could play with it. But last week for the Pitt game, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, for the Pitt game, he wasn't close. And so I think the bye week is going to be huge for him, and being able to rest up and, recover a little bit more. So we'll see on Tuesday and Wednesday. Another reason to subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com for practice notes and tidbits from that. But this is going to be a big week for him to see if he can go and play through whatever it is. But this season, he's been, really just clutch, I think, for SMU. He's made some key grabs with RJ Maryland going down. He became SMU's quote unquote active leading receiver of the year, 19 receptions, 275 yards and a touchdown. But Roger Daniels has stepped in and stepped up. He went from playing slot receiver to playing a little bit more running back to playing slot receiver again. And he had a huge finish to that Duke game. And of course had the touchdown against Pitt that dazzled as well. But it'd just be nice for SMU to get a reliable veteran receiver back into the fold. It would allow, just to be able to rotate a little bit more. And when you look at down this stretch for SMU, the bye week came at such a perfect time, because if SMU can keep up its winning ways, Boston College, UVA, and Cal to round out this season, they'll play for an ACC championship. But another piece of that is it would be nice if SMU can continue to rotate and keep players fresh. Like Logan Parr did not practice when we were allowed in last week. He was off doing conditioning on the side. And for these big guys that are physically beat up at this time of year, that's a big opportunity for him to get healthy. It's a big opportunity for a guy like Tank Booker to get healthy, for Jonathan Jefferson, who missed some time earlier this season, to get fully healthy. Those are things that are very important. And SMU does like to rotate players and make sure that they are fresh. So that is something, probably one of the bigger things that I'm watching this week, is how close is Jake Bailey, or if Rhett Lashley's just going to rule him out on Tuesday and say, okay, he needs another week, which I'd said this on the pod with Hayden, and you listen to Trevor, and look, BC had lost 3 straight games. They found a little bit of fire there with Kai Robichaux absolutely going off against Syracuse. They were able to make some plays in a pretty high scoring affair. I think SMU is going to be able to score relatively at will against BC based on what Syracuse did. Even as a kind of one-dimensional team, SMU is balanced. And if they don't turn the ball over, they're going to get theirs against BC. So that's what I'm really watching for with SMU, is the ability to maybe have a little bit more rotation, have a little bit more wear and tear taken off some of these players down the stretch, because if they do end up facing Miami, they're going to need to be at as full speed as they can be. So whether that's this week or maybe, another week for Jake Bailey, it would be really nice to get him back at some point if you're SMU. So we'll be looking forward to an update from Rhett Lashley on him on Tuesday. So that's a key piece just to kind of reset things after a bye week, in case you kind of took a little deep breath there during this season to see where maybe SMU's at and things like that. This is kind of a quick catch up there as far as the injuries. Other than that, though, I think SMU's in pretty good shape. Jalen Davis Robinson is another one we're watching. He's kind of got, sounds like a little bit of like an undisclosed injury situation going on right now. But I know he went down at some point, but we'll be seeing if he can get back. But he did play against Pitt. And so him, Kobe Wilson, those are kind of the ones that we're watching here late, or not late, but now that we're back to it on the defensive side of the ball to see if those guys will be ready to go. But when I look at this game for SMU, it's a big opportunity to once again get recruits on campus. Playoffs are starting in Texas this weekend, so there will be a lot of players that have their attention on that. You'll have teams practicing on Saturday or meeting on Saturday after their games on Friday night. Some teams will be playing on Saturday as well. So that could impact a little bit as far as recruiting lists and things like that. But I can tell you down the stretch here of this season, SMU is starting to turn its attention more and more to the 2026 and 2027 classes. Of course, the portal's coming. The portal will be a huge focus for SMU, but Rhett Lashley and his staff are really starting to just, I think, hit their groove even more in recruiting, because you're seeing the success on the field for SMU, and they're hoping to finish strong and hoping to finish with an ACC championship and a college football playoff berth, which the rankings will be updated on Tuesday. That'll be very interesting to see where SMU slots in on that. Do they still side with Miami as the ACC champion? That'll be something we watch for on Tuesday night. But with that, SMU is able to, really dial it in on recruiting and selling. Hey, the vision is working. They've won a ton of football games over the last however many years, but especially the last 2 years, turning towards two back-to-back 10-win seasons, 10-plus win seasons. And that is what you want if you're an SMU fan, the ability to sell on-field success, play for your hometown, NIL, facilities, all of those things, and the ability to win a championship. If SMU goes out and takes care of business, they are going to be put in position with a first-round bye in this 12-team playoff to win a national championship. I'm not saying they're going to do it, which how unbelievable would that be? Something that isn't talked about enough, but with the 12-team playoff, things could get wild. You get the right matchups. And look, TCU made it through the 14 playoff to play for a national championship. They, unfortunately for them, ran into Georgia. This is a SMU team that if they get that first round bye, if they look ahead or if they get, into these games and draw the right matchups, they could end up playing for the national championship. And of course, there's going to be SEC, the Big Ten, but I don't think there's a team like Georgia this season that is that dominant. SMU will have their hands full, but it is going to be a different story at some point if SMU ever got to that stage. Just the parity of this college football season, I think you can make the case for multiple teams as far as them being the number one team in the country. And that makes it exciting for recruits and something that SMU continues to sell. Rhett Lashley went out this past weekend and they went on the recruiting trail and saw 4-star quarterback Ty Hawkins. And you want to, if you're SMU, continue to babysit this one all the way through, because in the era of NIL, in the era of, these teams that can come after players and make a late push, you want to make sure you have your ducks in a row. And right now, Ty Hawkins is ready to enroll early at SMU and go ahead and make that move to Dallas here in the 2025 year, as the Mustangs will be coming off a season that is really, really respectable. And so I have not heard anything crazy as far as him, flipping or anything like that. But Rhett Lashley, De'Aaron King made their way from Houston to IMG last week to watch him win another game or play another game against St. Thomas More. I didn't actually look and see if they won, but I assume they did. Yes, they won 28-7, so really smooth final game there of IMG season. So for now, it is Ty Hawkins' time to focus on SMU, focus on finishing up at IMG and graduating and enrolling in SMU at SMU next year. So this is going to be a huge opportunity for this program as you look ahead to 2026 and beyond to make a lot of noise on the recruiting trail. They're knocking on the door of that top 25 ranking. And for SMU, I don't know if they can get there in the 2025 class. They are poking around on some prospects late in the game. And of course, we noted that in the last Hilltop review for people as far as a 5-star to watch, but it's a really exciting time if you're an SMU fan following this team in recruiting. So as SMU gets down to the backstretch of the season, a couple notes before I let you guys go here. SMU Virginia will kick off at 11 a.m. Central on ESPN2 in 2 weeks. That game in Charlottesville, the last regular season road game for the Mustangs. And UVA coming off of a win over Pitt last week, 24-19, as Hayden and I covered in Coast to Coast. That was a big win for the Cavs. They came out and they were able to find a way in Pittsburgh. They kind of got a little bit of help there from a weird officiating decision about refs being in position. Would have given Pitt favorable field position to maybe go down and score a game-winning touchdown. But nevertheless, UVA pulled it out on the road, dishing out a second straight loss to Pitt. And Tony Elliott is 2-1 in his last 3 games against top 25 opponents from what I saw, and maybe that said on the road or something like that. But this UVA team is interesting. Not that the team needs to look ahead. They know what Boston College presents, but UVA, for the most part, kind of gets one of those weird wins at home the week before Virginia Tech just about every year. So SMU will have to be ready to go for that game, as well as Cal. Cal is being able a team that is very close to being one of the better teams in the ACC. Just so many tight games for them and heartbreak and things like that. But they'll be a pesky team. So SMU has to be ready to come out and play. I think they will be. This is really the first time this season that SMU will be coming off of a bye and then going into a home game since going into TCU. And obviously they were able to prepare for that game with Kevin Jennings as a starter. They took it to the Horned Frogs. And SMU has been so good at home this year. And really last 2 years. Obviously, I picked SMU to beat BC. I don't think this one's going to be very close. And we'll have your full coverage at ontheponyexpress.com. So we'll be back next week with a lot more on basketball. We'll recap Friday's game at Butler. Of course, as I'm recording this, it is before SMU plays UNC Greensboro. So maybe the debut happened of a one Samet Yigitolu, which would be huge news for SMU. Of course, watching Matt Cross with his injury on top of that. But that, you'll just have to be on theponyexpress.com to see if any of that gets resolved and updated and things like that. But, for SMU, it is quite the time of year with this championship stretch run that they are pushing for to get to Charlotte December 7th. And I don't really think there's too much else. It's kind of that interesting time with another bye week, and this team just doesn't have too much drama associated with it. So it's kind of nice right now. We'll keep you guys updated at ontheponyexpress.com and look forward to sharing more news about more podcasts coming to the network as well. So be on the lookout for the QB Chronicles with Kyle Padron and Garrett Gilbert later this week. But I hope you guys have a good rest of the week as SMU gears up for Boston College Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ESPN from Ford Stadium. Stick with ontheponyexpress.com for all the latest on recruiting and more as the Mustangs get ready to battle it out against BC, looking for some revenge in those all-black uniforms against BC after last year's loss in the Fenway Bowl. So, but before we let you go, here's one last word from our friends at Brandon Thomas Subaru.
At Brandon Thomas Subaru, we're unlike anyone around because we're a part of McKinney, and North Texas is the place we proudly call home. We're in the schools. We're at the hospitals. We're with the underdogs. And we're proud to support the Love Promise Fund by investing in your community and doing the most to make a big difference. Visit us today at Brandon Thomas Subaru in McKinney or online at BrandonThomasSubaru.com. Home of the Thomas Promise.
All right, that wraps up another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll catch you guys next week. And Dean Rawski will have your After Stang show as SMU takes on BC this weekend. So thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys next.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to OnThePonyExpress.com for more coverage.